Looking good, Italian job.
I'm feeling good, Tommy boy. How are you, brother?
I'm a little under the weather, but I'm okay. This 75 hard, ironically, is not getting any easier. And yet I've been more successful this year than last year. A lot of cold weather running and rucking, which I'm sure is not great for the lungs. But it's just, what can I say? I'm addicted to the fellowship. So I keep getting after it. How about you, my friend?
There may be correlation between you getting up at the early hours of the morning and going outside when it's, in the teens to go
Right.
for a run or a ruck and the way that you feel. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a professional. I don't even play one on TV. But, how am I doing? Great. Spent some time in the gloom this morning, actually, and just great conversation, just more chatter than anything else. And you nailed it. It's that fellowship piece. It's just spending time with my friends and spending time with my brothers and having the conversation, sometimes sophomoric and humor, sometimes acting like a kid. But let's be honest, I've said it before. We might get older, but we don't necessarily mature. We might still be in the 8th grade with some of the comments and and things that we do, throwing snowballs at each other and that kind of crazy stuff. It's good times to be had by all.
It is. It is. That's a nice segue actually to today. You and I have been really amped up for this conversation. It's an important one to be had and one that we don't have enough. And when we introduce the concept, I think guys will think that they've had it quite a bit, but it's a lot like, I run from time to time in the morning. It's like, but have you run 10 miles? Well, then how much have you really run? Have you run a BRR? Let's talk about what it's like to really run and push your body. We had a COT today where the Q had just planned to not say anything. He wanted to give it away to the packs if anybody had something on their heart, on their mind, and he said, "I'm just going to put it out there. If anybody feels moved to take us out, the floor is yours." And of course, it's that awkward silence that we know. And he jumped right back in and said, "By the way, I'm okay with awkward silences, so this will go on as long as you need it to."
As long as it needs.
And somebody stepped out of the gloom and shared something that had been obviously weighing them down for quite a while. And it was one of those moments where 2 or 3 guys afterwards approached him and said, "I'm glad you said something. I've been thinking about that myself and not knowing what to do or where to turn." And then the side conversations start happening, and we all go to cafeteria. And before you know it, the whole conversation around a cup of coffee is how can we plug ourselves in and get involved and have an impact and make a difference in a positive way, not just for the one guy, but for the community, right?
Yeah.
And so. Ironically, as fate would have it, you had received a wonderful email, powerful email from one of our guests today, just introducing herself and her connection and the F3 tie-ins. And yeah, guys, you heard me say her. So yes, we will have a female on the show today.
So be on your best behavior, guys.
Mind your
please.
P's and Q's.
That's
it's
right.
Going to be okay. But we're really excited. We're talking about the mental battle. We're really digging into mental health. We have talked at least once or twice on our show, IJ, and I know it's been a national conversation about CPR, right? When the signs of a heart incident arise, how can we train ourselves to be ready? And one of the key components of today's conversation are the signs of depression and mental health and how they flare up and present themselves, and how we as men in a group of friends and boys being boys can seriously identify those signs and plug ourselves in to be an asset, just like we would if somebody were suffering a cardiac arrest, right?
Yeah.
So enough about me. I'm really interested and anxious to bring Vickers. She's the president of NAMI in the Cabarrus region, as well as in North Carolina, across the state. So Anjie Vickers, welcome to the Stuff Worth Trying podcast. It truly is an honor to have you with us to converse.
Thank you, Tommy boy. It's an honor to be here today and to share my story. After working in the trauma intensive care unit in Charlotte for many years and critical care for many years, what I would have considered doing the hard stuff, I don't think it ever prepared me for what I experienced in 2021 when I lost my middle child to suicide. My middle son, Matthew, he died on May 3rd, 2021. And there was nothing that could have prepared me for that, or our family. It was a tragedy that my hope is to prevent anybody else from experiencing. And it was a couple weeks after he had died, just in my search to find answers, an email came across from NAMI that explained QPR. And it was a free course. I didn't even wait for the free course. I paid for it that evening. I took it throughout the night. And what I learned through taking QPR, just as you mentioned, was actually that there were signs that he had. But just like you just described, those of us, if we've never been trained, we may not know those signs. We don't know what we don't know. So I'm a QPR instructor, and my hope is that at one day I will be able to say, just like with CPR, when I started in nursing, it wasn't required that everybody had to have CPR. Today, if you work in any part of the healthcare system, it is a requirement that you have to have CPR. We know that an individual who may have a heart event, they have a greater chance of surviving if they are surrounded by somebody who knows CPR. Our goal is that those who are trained in QPR, which stands for question, persuade, and refer, is that we will reduce the amount of suicide, and more people, anyone who is at risk of ending their life, there will be somebody who can help prevent that.
Anjie, I've read before that QPR is kind of the emergency mental health intervention, kind of how CPR is health intervention for heart and respiratory. So, emergency mental health intervention. What does that mean? What does that mean for a guy who hears that and says, "I mean, that QPR, that's a cool acronym. What does that mean?" But what does that mean for mental emergency mental health intervention? I'm a little stuck on that.
That's the first I've actually heard of the term emergency mental health. And for me, what comes to mind with that would not be necessarily QPR. That to me speaks more to the reason why more men die by suicide is because when we think about men, and that the image of how we have raised boys from a young age, that man up, be strong, share your feelings or emotions, that's a sign of weakness. So when men are in that state where they are struggling, right, they are having a mental health emergency situation, more times than not, they are not going, combined with the stigma of mental illness, they are not going to reach out for the help that they need. So when I think of emergency mental health situation, it kind of brings up even a broader space. So when a man is having a mental health emergency situation, what can I do? Who can I reach out to? Unfortunately, my son reached out to BetterHelp, which is something that we hear often today. I don't think that so everyone is not adequately trained. They scheduled an appointment for him for a week later, which was too late. So I think part of it is also just what are you doing in this space, which is what I love. It's opening up the space to talk about it. So when somebody's in an emergency mental health situation, knowing who to turn to, what to do, knowing the signs, knowing 988. 988 is the emergency suicide hotline. It's the mental health crisis hotline. Knowing some of the warm lines, such as you can text 741-741 if you're in that space. I think as guys, again, just knowing those signs of somebody who may be struggling, and what to do in those situations, who to refer them to. Unfortunately, today, it may take 6 months, 3 to 6 months to get into a provider to get that help. So the more that we can train the communities in response to more about mental illness, mental health struggles, in addition to resources that are available within the community and who we can turn to when we need that help. I hope that
You
answers
mentioned
that.
resources, which kind of makes me think about kind of the journey that you went through as a family. So when your son was in crisis, he reached out, I imagine, to BetterHelp because it's all over everything. Did you know about NAMI, about the National Alliance on Mental Illness, before you needed to know? Meaning, was a suboptimal resource with more money made available to your son versus an ideal resource to you? Did you discover it via Google, or had you already heard of it? How did that happen?
I had heard of NAMI because my youngest of 3 children had went through a mental health crisis 2 years prior. And even at that time, he was hospitalized for 6 weeks. And it was only about 2 days before his discharge that we were informed about NAMI by
Mm.
the lawyer that was working with him, the DA, not by anybody in the healthcare system. So again, a tremendous resource that we don't do a good job of getting that information out. So I'd been relatively newer to NAMI, but as being part of NAMI, that is where I have been opened up to this world of all these resources within communities that so many people don't know about.
Mhm.
Oftentimes we ask people, how did you learn about NAMI? And too often it's, from somebody from church, a friend happened to mention it, or I Googled, how can I get help? Right.
Mhm.
And went to the internet. When our hope and our goal is that every individual is, whether it's NAMI, Mental Health America, any of these resources, that there is more of a general knowledge that is something that's discussed around the kitchen table.
Yeah, it's like it's almost as we talk, I'm thinking QPR. Before you and I met, an acronym I was not familiar with. I was familiar with NAMI, but not in an effective way. If somebody asked me where it were, I could maybe stumble through the acronym, and I could talk a little bit about mental health. Um, and and yet there's all these resources just under the surface, which is frustrating. I remember when my wife was diagnosed with MS, right? I hopped on the internet and how can I help or be of help or cure MS, and tried to cure
Mhm.
MS in one night on the internet, right? And fell down a rabbit hole of very valuable resources that you hate to think that they're there when you need them. A lot of times you want them there before you need them. Um, and some of us are fortunate to be surrounded by people with more knowledge than ourselves. Others are not, and that's why those resources are there. And then too, to put a pin in it, the national hotline,
Yeah.
and the money being put behind surely just advertising a 3-digit number that people can call when they're in crisis or their friend or loved one is in crisis. Um, you want to just shake some people and say, why do we not know this? Why is this not just free knowledge that's out there? How do we not learn this like we learn our preposition song in the 8th grade? Or, you know, and I make light of it, but knowing that there's a true frustration behind that. And that's why I think it's strength in numbers, right? And when you found your core, I love that you didn't um, end your journey by just tapping into the resource and taking what you needed, but rather putting yourself in the game and becoming an invaluable resource to, I imagine, countless others. Do you find validation in that journey?
I think because I've always been in a profession of taking care of others and healing people, taking care. That's my nature. And so being in this space, I want to help more people. I want to get those resources out so that it is basic knowledge. I see the opportunities even because we experienced it with not one but two children, the opportunities that we need to be starting these conversations much sooner, in middle school, high school, before our youth are even getting to college. Because unfortunately, the numbers with suicide are increasing. The struggles since the pandemic have increased. More and more of our youth are struggling with anxiety, depression, and other mental health conditions. Um, so there's so much opportunity and so much work to be done. And so that's why I love what you're doing, because you are helping to reach the masses, to get this knowledge and this information to others.
I love the concept of reducing the stigma through education and resources. And that kind of ties into what local region has done in F3. So I want to bring on Hop Hunter. Hop Hunter, real quick, how long you been doing F3? What's your home region and how'd you get that name?
So it's Ray Blackburn, Hop Hunter 51. I'm in the MECA region in Charlotte. F3 Afton is my home base, and tomorrow is my 7-year F3 anniversary. So 7 years. And I guess all they knew about me when I got named was that I liked hoppy beer. So it worked out pretty well.
Pretty solid. So, Hop Hunter, I know that you guys recently had your fourth annual. You had an event to raise awareness. Can you tell us a little bit about the Mount Afton Challenge? What is it? What did we do? Or how many folks attended? How much money was raised? What was the reason that you guys started it? Just kind of give us an idea, high level. What was the Mount Afton Challenge?
Yeah. I'm going to take you to the beginning. We started, the first event was January 2021, and we were on a Saturday morning run a couple months prior, and one of our packs, Tugboat Willie, said, I'd really like to do something for a family. I've got a family member that's a young man that's had cancer, and I'd really love to raise some money. He was inspired by another group locally, our Harrisburg brothers, that had done some events, and so we started noodling on it over the course of that run, and kind of started a concept that we ironed out. And in January of 2021, we had our first event. We had 50 packs. This was in the middle of COVID time, and we ended up raising close to $4,000 and was able to send money to this family. It was awkward because the money was coming to us, and so as far as we learned pretty quickly, if we're going to keep doing this, we need to figure out a way to do it better. And so year two came, and leading up to that, we were thinking we would do a separate calls every year, find something to support. And January, or actually July of 2021, our brother, who's over my shoulder here, Damon Hudgens, Amway, we lost him. And it was a shock to our group, to the core, as you might imagine. As we all have talked about, as you guys spoke about earlier, we all go through periods where guys have struggles, and we knew Damon had some, but we never dreamed that would be an outcome that was possible. And so that kind of changed the course of what we wanted to do as our mission. And just a couple months later, another PAX, William Hatcher, named Chicken Little in the Lake Norman, Mooresville area, had a similar outcome. And so we kind of became emboldened to make mental health our mission for the event going forward. And through that, unlike cancer, heart disease, there's lots of associations, lots of groups to attach yourself to. But when you look at mental health, it was a challenge to say, who do we partner with? There's care providers, but kind of larger entities. But who's in the grassroots? Who's somebody that we could partner with and really make an impact with? And I was told to call NAMI. It's sad to say I was not familiar with NAMI at all. I didn't know what they did. But I was connected to Anjie. We had a call one morning, and I told her our story. And her response to me was, "Do you know my story?" And I said, "No, I didn't know anything." And she shared it, and I knew that was our partner that we wanted to grow with, that we wanted to support. Obviously, went back to our group because I know you're talking to me, but this. Our PAX makes this happen. We've got a big group that support this 100%, and that's what's allowed it to grow. But so from that point on, we knew we were going to support NAMI, and so to kind of fast forward, that year we probably had 150 maybe folks sign up, and we raised about $12,000. In 2023, a year ago, we had about 175 participants and raised $20,000+. And this past year, we really kind of caught momentum and blew up. And for us, anyway, we had over 300 folks register. We raised over $22,000, and it feels like the sky's the limit. And an important part of that along the way, we started working with the F3 Foundation. That was part of a relationship. Scratch and Win became a partner of helping with the financial side, and really giving us the ability to leverage the foundation and work through them. Really helped with our growth and helped get us out of the money business. Keeping good systems in place around all that, and just it gave us the confidence to try to grow. And we just had our fourth event Saturday, and are pumped to do it again next year.
I think it's amazing. You talked about, also not knowing what you don't know, and once you do understand, once you've tasted, you can't untaste, and you realize the ability you have to have strong impact and to move a whole group of people into an effective position, right? Um, and I'm reminded back in the 1900s when I went to high school. Um, I had a dear friend that was in a mental health crisis. We didn't call it that at the time. I just knew that he wasn't taking care of himself and didn't know what to do other than go to the guidance counselor. And thank goodness that she was legit and was good at guiding. She allowed me to take him off campus for a drive because it's kind of hard to not talk when you're sitting next to somebody in the car and for a drive, but we got to pick it apart a little bit. Still didn't feel great about it and went and talked to his parents. Again, thank goodness that we had a tight relationship with each other's parents. And we were able to all sit down, a whole bunch of us, and just let him know how much he was loved and how these temporary problems will be resolved because he's got a group around him, a tribe, if you will, and that tribe will eventually become a community. Tribes tend to thrive in necessity, right? And communities thrive in abundance. And he realized he had this abundant community around him that loved him, and this was not a problem he had to shoulder on his own. And that is unfortunately the only success story I know of in my relationship with mental illness and mental health and mental battles, as we in F3 call it. And obviously, with our partnership with the NGBN network, this whole network exists and is targeted to men in their 40s, 50s, and 60s because that is the demographic. And so to really talk about and understand why this conversation is so important and why we will continue to have it and need to have it, Anjie, could you just kind of bring us down a few notches and sober us up with some statistics that we need to hear?
Sure. So, according to the CDC, more than 48,000 people died by suicide in 2021. In that same year, the suicide rate among men was almost 4 times higher than the suicide rate among women. Ray, I look at him seeing Hot Punter. Ray had mentioned that we also had Chicken Little last year, and somebody had carried a picture of him showing with his Marine outfit on, his Marine gear. And so it wasn't until I had seen that picture and wanted to know more that I even learned even more statistics that I had not known prior to that, such as that there is, so he had participated in an event called 22 push-ups for vets because 22 veterans die each day by suicide. And so I had been asked in this past year to give a presentation to a construction group. I had no idea that it was 4 times higher than the general population among construction workers. And I gave a presentation to 65 men that worked in the industry as far as laying pipe. That's what my son had done. He was in construction, laying pipe. And so today we know that suicide is the second leading cause of death between the ages of 10 and 34. They're seeing children as young as 5 come into the hospital with attempts. So there is such a critical need right now for us to just, as I said, increase the space, increase the knowledge of the general population, and help to reduce stigma, because those numbers that are higher, again, it's the highest among men. We know that the suicide is also highest as far as the age. It is highest among 65 and over. That second next group is 35 to 45, which is some of what you said with this group. It doesn't mean that we're not seeing it in those other areas. And again, when we think of even some of those professions that men tend to occupy more often, again, it's that image of, I have this perception, being strong, that showing my emotions, or if I need help, it's a sign of weakness. And so that's one of the things that when I learned about F3, because I had never heard of F3 until Ray called me. And I thought, wow, what an amazing concept. Like if my son had had something like this, and had turned to exercise, because we know also that so many people that are struggling with their mental health oftentimes are going to turn to substances, whether that's alcohol or other substances such as drugs, because these substances help create a balance in the brain that makes them feel better. But it's also in some of those individuals that's also more likely for them to become dependent on those to feel better versus exercise. So nearly 50 million, or 19.86% of American adults experienced a mental illness in 2019. We're still kind of lagging in data. I can assure you that has gone up. So we know that 1 in 5 Americans have some type of mental health condition. That has also changed. I'm starting to see that it has moved to 1 in 4. 4.5% of adults report having serious thoughts of suicide, and this has increased every year since 2011, 2012. 2022 was the highest that it has ever been since, I believe it was 1914. I mean, it's been like decades. We're reaching the highest numbers in decades. Here's another important one. I think it really speaks volumes, is more than half of adults with a mental illness do not receive treatment, totaling over 27 million US adults. So oftentimes, people are living with some type of mental health condition and have no idea. They're struggling, and oftentimes what happens is when they go into that mental health crisis, what we have discovered with suicide is that oftentimes it's a small window of time that they're feeling hopeless, despair. It's not that they don't think about everyone around them, but they feel that others would be better off without them. And they feel that they have so much pain in that space that they just want the pain to go away. So many people go to the Golden Gate Bridge to die by suicide. They've interviewed the 1% that have survived, and almost every single one of them have said that they had regrets as soon as their feet left the bridge. Meaning, if we can help, again, educate more of our community to recognize the signs, doesn't mean that we're going to always be able to prevent suicide, but it does mean that there is going to be an increased chance that we are able to.
Angie, you've mentioned the signs, and we in F3 we have the opportunity to have a community, brotherhood, and fellowship. And a lot of folks who feel like they don't have a community, no one's going to miss me, and that's not true. Anybody who's listening, please, we need you to reach out. We need you to reach out to someone. But Angie, what are those signs when I see something that just doesn't feel right? What are the signs that we can kind of step in and say, brother, let me love on you and talk to me. What's going on, and let's see if we can help out. What are there any telltale signs that we should be looking for, especially with guys we see on a routine basis?
Yes. So some of those signs, they may be withdrawing, isolating themselves, talking about struggling with sleep, or that, especially if they make comments like that, they may hope to never wake up, maybe drinking more. Trying to think of some of the other ones so you may see like anger that's out of character for them. Again, I think struggling to sleep is a big one. They may withdraw, they may make possible statements on social media or to friends about just, again, that despair. Oftentimes the situations that are surrounding those are maybe a breakup with a girlfriend, or a separation from a marriage, or a divorce, financial struggles, loss of employment, health. So they may have an injury, or they may be struggling with illness, or chronic illness. And again, that kind of like goes back to that feeling of hopelessness and despair, and feeling like they can't get through this, that they have so much pain. And again, just helping people to see that they're not alone, that we do care, and that this is temporary, and that we can, you have a long life ahead of you, and that there is help.
Yeah, it's interesting too as you're rattling that off. I'm sitting here thinking of a problem that we in Greensboro have yet to quote unquote fix, and I'm curious, having guys from two other regions on here. Tying Job, you and I have not talked about this before, and Hop Hunter, certainly you and I have not either. Does your region struggle with the way to, again, quote unquote, solve the guys that drift away from the workout, and we realize a month later, oh my gosh, I haven't seen so and so in a while? I know in Greensboro we've struggled with how do we make sure that guys are accounted for, right? We put together committees and SLTs, and we promise we're going to get in and look at our roster and who have we not seen, and we do that relatively well. I would say it's ineffective in the grand scheme of things. And yet, Anjie, as you're talking, I'm thinking that if there is a solution, it points back to what we're about, which are small workout groups for men. Meaning, when you're 18 or in number and less, you can account for each other. When you get beyond that 15 to 18, 20, you start to get into trouble of that negative return of investment. There's no way you can reach each guy in a 45-minute period or on a 60-minute period on the weekends or what have you. But that magic number of for me, it's always kind of been 12 to 18. I feel like I can get around and engage with all the men in that time period within that number. Again, I promise on the front end I wouldn't ramble much, but now I'm rambling. IJ or Hop Hunter, do you men experience the same, or have you found a solution?
I'll go and jump in. We've kind of built out some of those committees where we're really good about reaching out to an FNG, a friendly new guy, an F3 parlance, a guy who comes out for the first time. We get his information. We send him a welcome message, a text, or an email that says, "Hey, here's who we are. Here's where we meet. Let's get you on the newsletter." But you're exactly right. A guy that when your numbers get so big and you're opening a new AO or you're spreading your region and getting larger, it's difficult to keep up with where everybody is. And honestly, that's where that second F and third F really gets involved. Sometimes it's difficult to keep up with the guys at a workout because, hey, man, there's 6 other workouts this morning. I didn't see you because maybe he was just across town. But when there's second F events where everybody comes together to have coffee, or maybe it's hump day happy hour or something along those lines, when you start noticing that those guys aren't there, it really, what I've seen has been successful is when someone just happens to have them in their phone and just happens to say, "Man, I haven't seen so and so in a while. I should reach out." But that takes a concerted effort. It literally means that you stop what you're doing. I haven't seen Tommy Boy in a while. I should send Tommy Boy a message. I should see what's going on. Have we conquered it? Have we mastered it? Not in the slightest. We've put aside committees. We've said somebody should. But let's be honest. If somebody should, no one ever does. So that somebody, be that somebody. But I'm interested, Hop Hunter. What about you guys? Do you guys have any kind of anything that you keep track of that Cotter? You kind of lost track of him, haven't seen him in a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I would ditto a lot of what you guys just said. I mean, I think it's we do as a group really try to stay in touch with the guys that have kind of not been around in a while, but it's not perfected, right? You reach out and you hope to make contact and hope to hear back, but sometimes you don't, and guys kind of can slide away. But I know at a region level that there's work happening around that right now. But I think as a whole, it's something we're all looking to perfect, right? It's something you don't want to see guys kind of disappear that may need you, right? And one of our sayings is show up to be the medicine, or actually show up to get your medicine, but also to be the medicine for everyone else, and that's something we all really believe for sure.
Here's
so
a thought or an idea. You may do something like this, but when you show up for these workouts, what about incorporating a concept about maybe once a month, you pick a date of every month and you have a mental health check-in. Okay, how are you doing? And that you create the space that you want everyone to be honest, but it at least gives an opportunity to see if there is someone struggling, that you kind of know, maybe we need to be keeping tabs, kind of like checking in on somebody, that again, kind of opening that space, but bringing it to the forefront. This is important. We want to make it a focus, and we want to make sure that we're all, in a good space, and just kind of like taking 5 minutes out of a
I
workout.
love that. Love that. Hop
That to
Hunter,
me sounds like stuff worth trying.
that's exactly right. I mean, that is stuff we're trying. Hop Hunter, I'm interested. Tell me about Amway. Just tell me about that man, the man you know and love so much.
Yeah. I mean, he was a father, a husband, has two great kids. Was the master Q at our AO the year before we lost him. Was hardworking. He had, I think, the one thing everyone would say about Amway, and several of our packs were extremely close with the family. But if there's a brother that always had a smile on his face, it was him. The biggest smile, and you can barely see the little picture in the background. I wish I had a bigger one, but he's got a big smile in that picture, and you will not find one of him where he doesn't have that big smile. So just the happiest guy, the funnest guy, humblest guy to be around. And yet that all makes it all the more shocking when you lose someone, and really to take it back to a lot of what we talked about early with the QPR training. That's one of the things that Anjie did for us as a group. Shortly after, we wanted to, you're left with that feeling of how did we let that happen? How could we, every man looked in the mirror and said, I did not do something I should have done, because this shouldn't have happened. And we were hungry to learn, still learning. But the QPR was a big step to try to think about what we might have said wrong, what we could say right if we're ever in that situation again, to ensure we don't fumble, and that we to do the right thing, and take that training, and hopefully that's something that others out in the nation would be able to tap into as well.
And
In
Angie, I want to know.
addition, well, I was going to just say, at the event, Damon's wife walked up to our NAMI table that we had, and she started talking, and then she recognized me. We had worked together as nurses back in 2000. I think it was probably like 98, 99, 2000. So we had worked together for some time. And similar to what Ray just said, I think, so the day my son died, he had sent me a message, and he said, Mom, this is what you can get me for my birthday. And it was a picture of a book called Man Enough.
Mm.
And Man Enough, and I thought, I wonder why he would want this book, and I went to Amazon, put it in the cart and everything, had no idea that some of the things he had been struggling with for the 4 days before. He had only had one attempt before, and it was 2 weeks before his high school graduation. He was 17 at the time. And he had promised me he would never do that again. That was something stupid. I'll never do that again. I think that's also the reason why he didn't call me, because he didn't want to worry me. But the book Man Enough, as I mentioned, it goes back to, again, the whole culture of how we raise our boys. And that's where we have to change it, So
Angie, tell us about your son.
my son, Matthew, he was, as I mentioned, he was the middle child. He had an older sister and younger brother. He had struggled throughout most of K through 12, and it wasn't until 10th grade he came home, said he couldn't focus. So the only thing he had ever been diagnosed with was ADD. And but he was also kind of the life of the party. He was surrounded by people who loved him. He had many friends. He had gone off to college and then came back, and that's where he was a little bit on the wild side. Loved Harleys, so he rode a Harley and hung out with. There was there's over 300 people that came to his service because they all loved him. And so many of them said, I can't believe he didn't call me. We didn't see the signs. Even, our family, we hadn't really heard from him too much just prior. And we thought, it's just typical because, he was in his 20s. He was doing things with all his girlfriend and all his friends. So it wasn't uncommon. But today, his friends, I've heard them say, if we were to have that conversation today, it would look very different. Again, the struggle, because, when I saw that text, if I had only responded sooner, if I had called, like, why, if I had done something differently, could he, would he still be here? So it is a struggle. But again, I think just like Damon, he was oftentimes, he was always the joking. We have a large family and would do often things together. And my grandson has Down syndrome, and he's 10, but at the time he was, 3 or 4. And Matthew said he would always be looking after him. So he was always with our family. He was the jokester. He was the one making everybody smile and laugh. So.
The great uniter. I understand. You're reminding me of the conversations we had with that friend in high school, and exact same qualities. Big heart, felt everything. I can't thank you all enough. I have a feeling we will get this band back together in the future to have a further conversation. But the wealth of resources alone, those of you watching, listening, Anjie provided some great resources. Please find your way over to the National Alliance of Mental Illness website. It's NAMI.org. We will link in the show notes their introduction to QPR and how to find resources for training in your area. So definitely take a moment to get into the show notes and dig through those links. I'm reminded of a quote by an author, Matt Haig, that says, "Soak up the views, take in the bad weather and the good weather. You are not the storm." So I hope that shines a little bit of light. If anybody needed to hear those words today, I know it's a good reminder for me. Anjie, thank you for being vulnerable and being open, and most importantly, for being helpful to the three of us. Hop Hunter, keep leading the charge, man, and leading at the tip of the spear. Every community needs a guy like you that's doing what they are doing so that we don't have to keep doing it anymore. Italian Job, I know you've had a week. I've had a week. If another man hadn't told you this yet, I love you, brother. Thanks for riding this wagon train with me. And we'll see everybody next week. Until then, it even says it on the hoodie, be good or be good at it.
Love you, man. Thank you so much.